Okay, let's go ahead and get started on this there, everybody. It's not showing the right. Okay, what's going on here? Are you not showing yourself? There we go. Not sure why that was giving me a problem there. Alright, welcome back to another Unreal study session. Uh, we'll be joined by Blackheart in just a minute as soon as I invite him to speak. But I wanted to just address the fact that, hey, we're going to be working on some more um, Unreal Engine study session, looking through tutorials, looking through all the topics, getting ourselves prepped for eventual build of everything. And um, so yeah, I believe the last thing that we covered was the native sound ambisonics rendering, which we got down to the very bottom, and we were like going, we were getting to the point where it was getting a little bit more in depth. I believe we stopped off at sound classes, but I'm not 100% sure. It's been a several days since we really covered the Unreal. So let me go ahead and get Blackheart into here and let's start talking about it. So there you go, there Blackheart.
Hello there, Jim.
How's it going?
I'm an A-okay. From where we left off, we did went through sound classes general properties, and that was it.
Yeah,
We didn't go into child classes on.
right. Yeah, right. Because we did, talk about the low pass filter, attenuation, and so on and so forth. Right. So, um, okay. So, um, we're gonna continue on from here and move on to child classes and so on and so forth. Now, will we actually be doing something directly in Unreal? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on if we're like really wanting to, um, you know, get like understand what they're really doing. So far they haven't been, these examples haven't been too bad in that like, hey, I can actually see what they're kind of doing here. So, you know, getting to understand like, hey, the children is going down to the child class. Makes perfect sense to me, or at least their screenshots, you know,
Yeah.
are showing enough there. Um, but if we need to step into the class, into Unreal itself and work on it, then we will. But so far, we haven't really needed to do that too much. So, alright, ready?
Yep.
Alright, so child classes. A sound class can have other classes set as classes. Makes sense. To add a child class, either click the plus icon in line with the child classes and select it from the drop down. Okay, so you just kind of, select, typically the child classes would have something like, zero array elements or something along those lines there. So if you wanted to add one, then you just hit that plus and then select like a different child class. So makes sense. Um, or drag the sound class onto the graph and connect the children output pin from the parent class node to the input pin of the child class node. So if you have two sound classes there, then you can just take the children, connect it to to what would be children. So, and I would imagine that you can kind of do that for multiple, not just the single. I don't think
I'm pretty sure you
so.
could do multiple.
Yeah, seeing that there is always the possibility of having multiple children in terms of classes. So when that sound class is set as a child, if set to inherited, see loading, it will inherit features like pitch, volume, loading behavior from the parent class. In this way, the user can alter the settings of both the parent and any of its child classes at the same time. Um, which you have to be a little careful because if you're if you want the child class to have, something that has like a different value than the parent, then like if you modify like for example, if you modify the parent, right, for the pitch, volume, and loading, it modifies the child, right?
Yeah.
But if you go down to the child and modify like volume, for example, like you make it slightly louder, right? But if you go back up to the parent class, if you change the volume there again, that might override what the child has. Might reset it, might set it back to its defaults. So I would imagine. But again, I'm not 100% sure on that one, but I would imagine that would be the case. So we'd have to be a little careful with that. So, um, passive sound mix modifiers. The sound class can have an array of sound class mixes attached that are triggered automatically when any sound within the sound class is played. These are called passive because they do not need to be manually activated. For example, they are triggered automatically when a member of sound class is played, without the need for an explicit push sound mix modifier command. You can still call the sound mix modifier through a push command if you want, and multiple sound classes and blueprints can refer to the same sound mix modifier. Okay. Um, Again, based off of what they're doing here, obviously um, they're changing the original class in some way with the mixes. How? Don't really know. Don't know what the mixes are.
I don't
Um,
know myself.
so um, so not quite sure what's really kind of going on there. They do go to submixes later on in the working with audio section, so we may, we'll get there, I would imagine. Um,
Hopefully.
hmm.
Hopefully.
Well, I mean, we will get to it. It's just, I don't
Yeah,
know.
that explains it properly.
Yeah, I don't know if it's actually explaining these in particular. So don't really know. But um, but yeah, the interesting that you can play these individually, and which I mean, maybe it makes sense. I don't know. Not quite sure. Like there's nothing here that really gives a good like explanation as to why you might need that. But obviously, if you have a good sound designer, they might go, well, if you need to have this happen, you need to do this. If you need to have that happen, then you'll probably want to do this, whatever. Um, so we'll have to see. Otherwise, we're gonna have
Yeah.
to really be playing around with this quite a bit when we do get eventually get the sound. So,
Yeah.
but so far, um,
I don't know
you know,
what we would use that for.
yeah. Well, we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, when we're building our first game, we're probably gonna have fairly basic audio. You know, but I mean, like I said, we'll learn as we go.
Yeah.
So, okay. For example, they're triggered automatically when played. Right. So we've already kind of covered all that. So yeah, we move on. Each passive sound mix modifier can be given a minimum and maximum volume threshold for parametric volume to control when it should activate. As an example, this gives the user a way to prevent a faraway sound that has attenuated to an inaudible quiet volume from triggering a sound mix modifier. Mm-hmm. In what way? You know, it's like, as an example, this gives the user a way to prevent a faraway sound that has attenuated to an audible quiet volume from triggering. Hmm.
I don't really understand it.
Yeah, maybe they. Oh, okay. I get it. I get it. I get it. Okay. So, they don't want that sound being played, right?
Yeah,
At a certain point, like you have maybe you have like a machine shop, right? And you have like presses and clanking and so on and so forth. That's all kind of part of the same sound class, right? You know,
right,
it's like an ambient sound with you where you have like multiple other sounds child classes that are kind of a part of the overall sound class, right?
right.
So what you can do is you can basically say, well, at a certain point, one person shouldn't necessarily be hearing this anymore. Meaning, like, if you're going further and further away, you may get to a point where you're no longer hearing those particular sounds, right? So,
Right.
um, so as you're going further and further away, the volume of said um, sound effect, sound class is getting lower and lower and lower until you get to a point where it's so far you're so far away that it you know you should no longer hear the clanging or anything along those lines. So it no longer because you had that minimum volume threshold. Once it gets past it, you no longer hear that little clanging sound anymore.
Hmm.
That's how I'm kind of interpreting it from from what I think is what they're trying to go for here. So at least I hope that's the right way of interpreting this. If not, then oh boy, I'm in trouble.
If not, then just correct us. If not, correct us on the chat or in the comments if you're watching this later.
Indeed, indeed. Um, but I think that's probably what's kind of going on here.
It
So
does sound like that.
yeah. With this feature, a sound designer can create complex behavior in EQ and relative volumes in sound classes without adding a lot of blueprint triggers. What is EQ again?
Let me go back.
Hmm, I don't know what EQ
No,
stands for.
no, neither do I.
Okay,
And I couldn't find it.
there's another one that's like, okay, we don't know what that could, what that is referring to at all. So it's not Unreal Engine. So, but it's something else entirely. Okay, we move on then because no clue. Routing. These settings control how the sound class audio is routed through directional channels with surround sound inputs in mind. So stereo bleed, LFE bleed, voice center channel volume, center channel only, applied ambient volume, and output target. So stereo bleed, this feature is now deprecated. Okay. All right, we don't need to worry about that apparently.
Apparently
Um,
not.
I mean, it would be nice if they kind of told us exactly what it's all about anyway, but apparently
Yeah.
it's no longer needed for some reason. Why it's still there, don't really know, but who knows. Um, LFE bleed. The proportion of the signal that should be sent to a low frequency effects channel. The default is 0.5 or 50%. Uh-huh. Okay. Um, Not sure what a lower frequency effects channel is all about, but uh, sure. I guess, they're sending a little bit of it to that channel for some reason. Who knows?
Mm,
Unless you're aware they're Blackheart, but for me, I don't really know.
no, no, we don't know.
Okay. Again, if there's anybody that knows, feel free to put it in the chat or in the comments for these videos. We appreciate any kind of additional input. If you're watching this. All right. Voice center channel volume. The proportion of the signal to be sent to the center channel. This is not a multiplier, and the value is not inherited by children. Uh-huh. Okay. Um, so, um, okay, so this is a proportion, probably percentage at this point, and it's meant to say go to the center channel. Now I'm assuming that this is, as they mentioned before, this is concerning surround sound setups.
Yeah.
So um, typically you have something in the center of the room, typically like either behind you or in front of you, that has like the um, main audio going through it, right? So that's what I imagine that this is, what it's kind of referring to for the most part. Just how much percentage of the volume is going through the main channel or the main speaker versus, all the other speakers, kind of thing. So,
Mm,
um, and apparently with this checkbox of the center channel only, you can, force it to be only the center channel. So when enabled, the sound will sent only to the center channel. So there's that. Um, Apply ambient volume. When enabled, the sounds within the sound class will be affected by ambient zone settings within audio volumes, such as interior and exterior volume and low pass filtering settings. So, okay. So I guess if you don't have this selected, then obviously interior, exterior volume, and low pass filter settings do not affect it whatsoever. So
mm,
now here's the thing. Here's where um I'm gonna assume that you pretty much want to have like ambient zone settings for just a lot of sounds in general, for the most part. Um, because, or at least, obviously depending on the game, but um, like if you're creating like a first-person shooter or something like that, then you're probably gonna be using a lot of ambient volume settings, wherever you go in like a
mm,
first-person shooter arena, right?
right.
Um, or you're gonna have like interior sounds, like someone shooting inside, you'll hear it slightly, but not all that much, right? So so obviously the ambient volumes would, step in place on that, but I don't know. I'm just thinking that um the only time that you would never really need ambient volume is if like you're wanting to just kind of play like game music or something like that. You know, then you would never need ambient volume in that. You just want the kind of the background music to be playing, when you're playing the game, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, unless you want to change the mood or something like that, like um, you're going from one area to another, and you're like going, hey, I'm gonna, change the music from something that's like, jovial and stuff like that into something a little bit darker or something like that. Maybe you're going into like a horror zone or something like that, so you're kind of making it a little creepy, lowering the volume or something like that. You're just kind of going, there goes the music, and good luck, that kind of thing. So, um, but obviously you'll have to. We would have to really work on that if we wanted to try to pull that one off. But yeah. All right. Output target changes whether sounds within the send class are sent to the main speaker and external controller or controller with playback to speaker if no controller present. Okay. What's what's the difference between an external controller and a controller? Okay. Not sure what that's all about, but um, maybe they'll talk more about that later. But I guess
I don't know. I don't think they will.
maybe not. Who knows? We'll have to we'll have to go from here for now.
Yeah.
Alright, submix. Sounds within a sound class that can be sent to a submix, which allows multiple sound types to be processed with sound mix effects at once. Okay, so send to master reverb send amount. When enabled, primary reverb settings are applied to sounds within the sound class. Default T reverb. The default amount of reverb effect to be placed on non-specialized sounds. Okay, no idea what that's all about, but sure.
Sure.
The submix that the output of sounds within the sound class are sent to by default. When set to none, the output will be sent to the sound class default submix specified in project settings. Okay. I'm not really understanding what they're trying to go for here, to be honest.
Sure.
Um, like, is this like the extra sound that is going to be playing in the default submix? Basically, like, hey, we're changing the sound in some fashion here, but the default submix we're changing it into some other, or we're adding to like another sound or something like that, or what? And I'm not quite sure
Um,
what they mean by non either. So
I'm not entirely sure either.
yeah. All right. Well, boy, our audio section is going well, isn't it, there, Blackheart? Oh well. I mean, it lets people know like where we stand in terms of audio, at least.
Yeah, we
If
are
the,
not sound engineers. This is not our strong point.
yeah, but I
We're
mean,
mainly programmers.
yeah, but I mean, at least we're willing to try to learn. We're trying to, you know, get
Put
it.
the effort in learning.
Yeah, so there's nothing wrong with that. But obviously, when it comes to, you know, being a sound engineer, yeah, we're not, we don't have the experience with that. Um, which if there are sound engineers that are actually watching this or listening to it or whatever, then feel free to comment, about this, help us out, learn what we're missing, what, you know, maybe try to explain, in some fashion or another how, what what we're maybe missing on along those lines, like, give a description about, what's going on with these and how do they differ in some fashion. That would be quite helpful. But, examples will definitely help out, you know, because like if someone was like going, hey, you have one bird singing over here, you have another bird over here, they're singing with each other, and this particular effect cancels out the sound like right in the center, blah blah blah, whatever, right? And it's like if you kind of give that kind of description, then great. That kind of tells me exactly what, that particular effect is. And then I might be able to use that in future games, right? So,
Right.
but obviously, there's a lot to learn. So, looting. When stream caching is enabled for a project, this setting controls how the compressed audio data is loaded. Okay. Inherited. When set to this option, the sound class inherits its loading behavior from its parent sound class. Okay. And what does it load? What is the
Yeah.
loading behavior all about? Okay, moving on. Retain on load. The first chunk of audio for sounds within the sound class remains in the cache until explicitly deleted. Okay. Um, uh, I'm assuming that maybe it gives you like a certain number of like seconds or something like that, or like, what exactly is this field? You know, is it just like a numeric number? Like how many seconds does it, or milliseconds? Um, is it like a percentage? I don't really know. I kind of wish that they had like a screenshot for this a little bit. So,
Yeah, and I'm looking in where it says loading, and I'm not seeing anything that clarifies how it actually works.
um, prime on load. After being loaded, sounds within the sound class remains in the cache, but risk being removed to make space for other audio if unused for long periods of time. Um, okay, so if you load the sound, then um, obviously it's primed to load. But if you're not playing it for an extended period of time, like you're going out of the zone for a long time and you no longer need it, then it just kind of gets dropped until to a point where it's like, hey, we might need to load this sound again, or like, hey, we're going back into this area, we need to load this. Um, so for example, like think Genshin Impact, for example, right?
Right.
If you're going from say Mondstadt to Liyue, right? When you're doing a teleport, you want the music to change from like the Mondstadt music to the Liyue music, right?
Yeah. Right.
So so you would load in the Liyue, while it's loading, and you basically put the Mondstadt kind of on the back burner, I guess you might say, like the retain on load, you know, section. So like if you ever like walk back to Mondstadt, then it might start, being able to kind of play the audio, initially while it loads everything else in. Maybe, I don't
So
know.
transitioning between one audio and the other, making it a little bit more smoothly.
Right. Um, but however, if you haven't been back to Mondstadt in a long time, then it might just be like removed altogether. So, like, you go to Mondstadt once, and then you go back to Leeway, and not you don't go back to Mondstadt ever again throughout the entire gameplay. So Mondstadt would eventually drop off. In terms of loading other audio files and stuff like that. So at least that's what I'm taking from this right at this moment in time. So um,
Yeah,
uh,
not clear how they determine the unloading part, like how long it's there or how it's even handled.
yeah, it doesn't even look like they give you like a time on here either. Like, um, maybe it's on the whole retain on load or something like that. I don't really know. But it
I
doesn't look
don't know.
like there's anything here that really specifies like, hey, this particular sound needs to stay there until uh, seconds or something like that. It might just be an engine process that gets handled. It might be like something that you have to set for settings. Who knows? Okay. Loaded on demand. Load on demand. No chunks of the audio are stored until the asset is played or primed. Okay. Um.
That one does make more sense. I mean, well, we have an audio loaded if set asset's not. That's suppose you have that sound's not even there yet.
Yeah. And what does it mean by no chunks of the audio? It's like, wait, are you trying to like save the end audio or something like that? It's like, are you trying to save like the end of the audio for some reason to play it back again? What are you guys doing here? You know, Not quite sure what this is all about. So, force inline forces the sounds within the sound class to only use non-streaming decode paths, and no portion of the audio is stored in the cache. Requires each sound wave asset's loading behavior override to also be sent to force inline. Um, yeah, I get that. I don't. I
I don't
yeah.
get it.
I'm not really understanding what they're trying to go for on that one at all,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna need some help on that one later.
Yeah, if someone knows what this is referring to, please let us know because we don't know what that's actually referring to.
Yeah. Um, and it's not like, you know, uh, like forces to sounds. Okay, sure. You know, how? You know, what's the non-streaming decode paths? No idea about those.
Nope.
Um, you know, it's saying, and no portion of the audio is stored in the cache. Okay, well, you know, um, what's was something like stored prior or something like that? Like, um, what would be stored in the cache? So and I get it. Cache in reference to um, you're whenever you're talking about, computer hardware, okay, there is, cache memory, which typically is very fast. It gets referenced by the CPU typically, That's what I think of when I think of cache.
Same.
Um, so, um, and cache and RAM are not the same. Just bear in mind, for anybody that's curious. It's still, RAM is still really fast memory, to be used, but it's not, cache is built into the CPU itself to be used, um, typically. Um, I don't know if this is the same kind of cache though that they're referencing because um, I don't know if like the sound files are like, typically they put a lot of handling certain functions, and they give it to you know, um, other parts of like the computer hardware. Okay, like for example, graphics. You go typically it tries to go to a graphics card if you have one for the graphics CPU to handle any of the requests concerning the graphics along those lines. Okay, so it doesn't bother the main CPU with with that extra data, right? Typically. So um, now I have not heard ever about like a well, I mean there are sound cards, but I don't think I've ever heard of a sound CPU before.
Neither
Unless
have I.
unless they've changed that recently, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm no hardware connoisseur, so I
Yeah.
wouldn't be sure.
Um, I haven't heard about a sound CPU. If they've recently made one, then great. Sure, makes sense. You take a little bit more um, it handles more of the processes of handling sound than and let the CPU handle other tasks. Sounds reasonable to me. If that is indeed the case that is being handled nowadays, then sure, makes sense. Does that sound card have its own CPU? And if so, that it has its own cache associated with it? And if so, is that what it's referencing? I don't know.
I have
Um,
no idea.
yeah.
I've never
Um,
used a sound card, so I don't really know.
yeah. Um, So requires each sound wave asset's loading behavior override. Okay, what is that? You know, sound waves assets loading behavior override. Don't know what that is. I mean, it's like, huh? And then of course, to also be set to force inline. In some ways it's like, I don't know exactly what the force inline is all about to really understand this second line in at
Yeah,
all
I
either.
don't know what
So
it's referring to.
yeah, so once we know what force inline is all about, then we'll have a better understanding of what the second line is referencing. But again, even the second line is just a little too overwhelming to understand at this point. So no idea. So I wanted to kind of break that down so people understand, like, where's some of the disconnect that I'm having, and maybe you're
Yes,
having
I'm
this.
also having much of that disconnect as well.
Yeah. So if anybody like comes on in and goes, okay, let's tackle this one by one, and let's give you some examples of what's going on. Here you go. Here you go. Here you go. And that would be fantastic. But
Yep.
obviously, we'll have to wait on that. Alright, so Legacy. This tab contains settings that were created before the audio mixer feature was added to the Unreal Audio engine. Some of these are only available when audio mixer is disabled. The audio mixer is enabled by default setting with version 4.24, and the legacy backends will soon be removed. Okay,
So I'm guessing
so
Unreal Engine 5 might not have this anymore.
well, I mean, they still put these in, but they're basically saying, hey, the audio mixers is basically taking over for this. So you can still try to use them, but more than likely it's gonna be gone. So you might as well not even bother. You
Yeah.
know. So radio filter volume, volume of the radio filter effect to apply to the sounds within the sound class. Available on Windows, Xbox with the X Audio 2 backend. Okay. Again, not quite sure what's going on. Radio filter effect. I mean, is it, something along the lines of, you actually sound like you're on the radio, like, hello, we're talking over the radio now, can you actually hear me? Blah, is it something like that, or is it something else that's going on there? I'm not sure. So, okay. Radio filter volume threshold, the volume in which the radio filter kicks in, available on Windows and Xbox with the X Audio backend. So obviously it could be, low and muffled, or it could be, super loud. Who knows? Um,
Probably.
if enabled, or output to master EQ submix. If enabled, sends the sounds within the output for this sound class to the reverb system that was used before the audio mixer reverb system replaced it. The setting is still respected by the audio mixer. Okay. So, um, okay, so I guess there's like a reverb system that is kind of separate from the audio mixer reverb, or like maybe the audio mixer reverb system is kind of using, like, there's a class for the
More
audio.
like an older version, probably, of that one.
Well, I mean, they're saying that it still, sends it to that reverb system. So it sounds like, um, um,
Like if you enable it, it'll respect that. If you don't enable it, it'll just rely on the reverb system, which is supposed to be replacing this.
yeah. So basically, what the way I see it is that you have this reverb system that they initially built, right? Has all these classes, has all these functions and stuff like that that you can reference, directly if you really wanted to. And that's what this whole output to master EQ submix is kind of doing. It's referencing those classes, those functions, and so on and so forth directly, right? But now you have the audio mixer that comes on in. It's kind of built off of that reverb system, and it still uses those classes and functions and so on and so forth itself, but typically you want to use the audio mixer to kind of handle that for the most part instead of trying to access it directly. So so that setting will still respect you still wanting to try to do that, access that, reverb system directly, but obviously you'll want to eventually switch on over to the audio mixer class, if you will, for like future work, because eventually they might say, okay, we're going to make all these classes, super protected, and audio mixer is going to be the only one that can actually have access to the reverb system, and suddenly, poof, there goes your access. So, at least that's how I'm interpreting it right at the moment. So,
Probably.
like Unreal Engine 5 might actually gotten rid
Not
of
have
this.
this anymore.
Yeah,
Okay.
so might
It's
not.
possible they just removed it altogether.
Yeah, they might have just basically said, "Hey, you can't do this anymore. You're gonna have to use the audio mixer." So, okay. They didn't um, bold this, but is UI sound? If enabled, the sounds within the sound class are audible within the user interface menus and during regular gameplay. The setting is still respected by the audio mixer. So, okay. Um, so basically, if you're wanting to like play music during the user interface as well as like during regular gameplay, like it has the same song in both the user interface and in the gameplay itself, um, then why not just let it continue, kind of a thing, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, you know, um, we have is music. If enabled, the sound is marked as music. Oh, okay. Wow. I mean, what different? What? Why is it different? Why even bother with that? What's the you know um
The difference between is UI sound and is music.
well, no, I
I'm
mean,
guessing on in the. Mhm.
what not the is UI sound. I get that part of it. What I'm wondering about is what makes a sound, you know, different if it's music or not music. You get what I'm saying? What's the what if I mark it for its music, what changes? What about the sound system does it go,
Yeah,
okay, if you want
yeah, what parameters automatically change or are completely ignored?
to, right, exactly. It's like,
What does it do?
right. Does it automatically say, hey, this sound is going to have to repeat every single time? Or, um, you know, does it, um, does it use some form of like orchestra kind of sound effect or something like that? It's like, oh, you're trying to change this into that, and therefore here's all the, you know, the sounds that you're trying to go for is a little bit more enhanced in some way. Like the trumpet actually sounds like a trumpet or something. I don't know. It
Yeah,
seems
not very
very,
clear on what it does.
yeah. So, all right, well, that's the end of this section. So,
Yeah,
we're gonna be moving on to audio console commands tomorrow
yeah,
because we're at the end of our section here, my friend. So,
yeah. It's already been an hour.
yep. All right, so I'm gonna be moving on to video uploads, but I'll need to use the restroom in just a second. And then Warframe later, which you will be joining me.
Yep, I will.
Okay.
Once I turn into Warframe, I'll probably talk a little bit about what I saw on the dev stream, which I did get to watch it.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
Uh, Too bad you didn't watch it. You've gotten free Umbra Forma.
Uh,
They
Understandable.
did notify that on the Game Awards, Warframe is gonna give away Sevagoth
Really? Hmm.
for everyone that watches it for at least half an hour.
Okay. That might be really nice because Sovgoth is kind of difficult to get, but
Yep, and you're not gonna get the Blu-ray. You get the Warframe
right,
already pre-built.
right. Okay. Well,
That,
I need to use the restroom. It's
yep,
saying, hey,
and I
you
need
need
to
to
get
go.
some food. So,
Indeed.
yes. Okay.
Okay.
See you in a little
Take
bit
care.
there, Jim.
Okay. See you in a bit. Bye. And yes, I do really need to go. So, kind this off here. So I want to thank you all for stopping by and joining me for this. Check out the description. Help me out with the YouTube algorithm, and I shall be back in just a minute. But for those of you watching the video, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Watch the other videos concerning this topic, or go check out the other playlists. Um, but I gotta go. Take care, all. Stop in the video.